modifying the FCC's net neutrality rule will take place just after noon. Work then will resume on a bill repealing a 3% withholding tax from certain federal contractors. Amendments and votes on that bill are expected this afternoon. And now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. O God, our Father, you have commanded the light to shine out of darkness. Accept our gratitude for your bountiful mercies. As our nation prepares to celebrate another Veterans Day, we praise you for the heroism of those who died to keep America free, and for your loving providence that continues to sustain this land we love. Lord, thank you for the legacy of service and sacrifice perpetuated by our military members and their families, and we ask you to continue to protect those in harm's way. As we honor the memories of those who gave the last full measure of devotion, infuse us with a greater determination to protect and preserve the liberties upon which our republic was founded. Use our senators today as instruments of your peace. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., November 10, 2011. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Tom Udall, a senator from the state of New Mexico, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
The majority leader is recognized.
The following leader remarks: the Senate will be in a period of morning business till 10 a.m. At 10, the Senate will begin consideration of the motion to proceed to S.J. Res. 27 with 2 hours of debate. Around noon, there will be 2 roll call votes on the motion to proceed to the joint resolutions of disapproval regarding net neutrality and cross-border air pollution. Additional series of 3 votes in relation to H.R. 674, the 3% Withholding Repeal Act, with the Veteran Job Amendment, and a cloture vote on the motion to proceed to the Energy and Water Appropriation Bill will occur later in the afternoon. These votes are currently scheduled for 2:30 today, but we expect to get a unanimous consent agreement to begin those as early as 1:45 today. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. The time under the previous order for resumption of consideration H.R. 674 be modified for the Senate to resume consideration of the bill at 1:30 p.m. and with all other provisions of that previous order remaining in effect. Further, that all after the first vote be 10 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection.
With this agreement, then, Mr. President, the Senate will resume consideration of the bill at 1:30 with up to 15 minutes of debate prior to the votes. There will be a series of up to 4 roll call votes beginning at 1:45. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, that Carolyn Tessa, State Department detailee, and my office be granted floor privileges for the remainder of this Congress.
Without objection. Mr. President.
Republican leader is recognized.
I'd like to start today on a positive note. Later this very day, the two parties will come together to do something we haven't been doing enough of around here. We'll pass a jobs bill on a bipartisan basis. Then we'll send it back to the House, where we hope it will pass shortly. In other words, we're going to legislate. I know that might sound a little like a groundbreaking idea to some of my colleagues on the other side who would rather spend all of their time putting together legislation aimed at sending a political message. But hopefully today's votes will help change that. As I've been saying for weeks now, we've got two choices. We can either acknowledge the fact that we live in a two-party system and work together on legislation both parties can embrace, or we can spend our time, as Democrats have for the past 2 months, putting together legislation that's designed to fail. House Republicans have chosen the former approach. Since taking over the majority earlier this year, they've searched for common ground when it comes to jobs legislation, and they've found it, passing more than 20 bills aimed at spurring the economy and creating jobs that have attracted strong bipartisan support. Meanwhile, the Democratic majority here in the Senate has opted for the latter approach. Taking their cues from the political team down at the White House, Senate Democrats have spent most of the time trying to make Republicans look bad instead of looking for ways to work with us on meaningful jobs legislation. But today, they've taken a break from all that, and I'm pleased to say that the two parties will pass two important pieces of jobs legislation. Senator Brown's 3% withholding bill, which eases the burden on government contractors, freeing up more money that they can use to expand and to hire, and a veterans bill sponsored by Senator Murray that not only helps returning veterans, but the businesses that hire them. On their own, these bills won't solve our jobs crisis. Far from it. No single piece of legislation can. But this attempt at bipartisanship has been used to get them over the finish line, represents our best shot at making progress on jobs and the economy, as long as Republicans have the majority in one half of Congress and Democrats have the majority in the other. We can still improve on the process, of course, through greater consultation within the Committee of Jurisdiction, but it's a good start nonetheless. This is how divided government works, though genuine cooperation and a search for common ground. It's what Republicans on the Joint Committee have been doing the past several weeks, and it's what House Republicans have been doing for the past year on legislation of the kind that will actually pass today. Now, this isn't to say that we shouldn't have open, full-throated debates that showcase our differences. The two parties clearly have different points of view when it comes to restoring the economy and creating jobs. And that's why we'll also have a vote today for the McCain-Paul Portman bill, which aims at unleashing the private sector instead of shackling it with more government, as our Democratic friends propose. The McCain-Paul Portman bill is a clear alternative to the President's failed model of endless stimulus. Members should have a chance to express their support for it. And I'm glad we will, even as we vote on things that we can all agree on. So my message is, let's keep it up, let's build on today's success, and move on to some of the other jobs bills that have already passed the House on a very broad bipartisan basis. I've highlighted two of them already. Today I'll highlight two more. The Access to Capital for Job Creators Act, H.R. 2940, and the Entrepreneur Access to Capital Act, H.R. 2930, two bills that make it easier for small businesses to raise money in innovative ways from small donors, generally over the Internet, often through social media. Here's a way to enable the little guy to raise money for his or her business and let small investors get into the game too. We all know that access to capital is one of the key ingredients to economic growth. Here's a way to make it easier for folks to get that capital that also creates new avenues for the little guy to invest. Senators Thune and Scott Brown have companion bills here in the Senate. We should take them up, and we should pass them.
Now, you don't hear a lot about Republicans and Democrats agreeing on legislation these days, but here's some we do actually agree on. So I'd say let's take them up, pass them, and send them to the President for his signature. The Obama administration has already said it supports these ideas. 169 Democrats in the House voted for one of these bills last week, and 175 voted for the other. And Republicans support both overwhelmingly as well. So let's do it. Let's build on the momentum we have today after passing the 3% holding and the Veterans Bill. Let's show the American people we've discovered and embraced a formula for success around here. Now, Mr. President, on another issue, tomorrow is a very important day, Veterans Day, the day we set aside to honor the service and sacrifice of the heroic men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces. America remains a beacon of freedom throughout the world today because of the commitments and sacrifices they have made. Over the years, many brave Americans donned their country's uniform to ensure that we would remain safe and free here at home. My own state of Kentucky has a proud and honorable military history, and today is home to both Fort Knox and Fort Campbell, which together house thousands of soldiers. The Commonwealth is also home to scores of brave National Guard members and reservists. The efforts of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from Kentucky and all 50 states continue today as our fighting forces courageously defend freedom from dangerous enemies all around the world. I've been honored to meet with the families of Bluegrass State service members who've been lost in war. I'd like to share with my colleagues a little of what they told me about how proud they are of their loved ones' service. One soldier's son said, "Nobody wants to see their father die, but to have it be while doing something of this significance, we're proud of him." Another soldier's widow told me, "There are no great words in a time of deep tragedy, but surely there are great men in the midst of great tragedy." And I'll never forget what a preacher said of his lost congregant. He didn't want to die, he didn't intend to die, but he was willing to lay down his life. That's what a hero is. On Veterans Day, we pay tribute to everyone who ever bore arms in service of this nation. We can express our thanks and our gratitude to those who are still with us, and we must honor in our memories those who did not return home. We pay tribute to the families of our service members, too, because they have made a sacrifice as well by loaning America their sons, daughters, husbands, and wives. And we pay tribute to the indomitable American spirit that is essential to the survival of liberty. It is thanks to America's veterans and their exceptional service that we have upheld this spirit. Lastly, I'd like to offer best wishes for a happy birthday to our Marines deployed across the globe, especially to our Kentucky Marines who have been such a source of pride to the Commonwealth. And on a related matter, Mr. President, I want to recognize Eastern Kentucky University, located in Richmond, Kentucky, for all the school has done on behalf of Kentucky's veterans. EKU has been named one of the top universities in the nation for veterans for the second consecutive year. The recognition was given to EKU by the Military Times Edge magazine for the university's commitment to help military veterans advance their education. EKU has made a concerted effort over the past several years to make the institution more hospitable to America's brave veterans. These initiatives include dropping admission fees for undergraduate veterans, granting in-state tuition to all out-of-state veterans, giving priority registration to veterans, designated housing specifically for student veterans, and creating a helpful withdrawal and readmission process for veterans. EKU's commitment to better education for our nation's heroes has, by all accounts, been a huge success. In addition to receiving national recognition from the veterans community, the university has seen its veteran population grow by some 40% in the last year. So today, on the eve of Veterans Day, I wish to honor Eastern Kentucky University for its dedication to better serving our country's brave veterans, and to congratulate the university and President Doug Whitlock on this well-deserved recognition. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 10 a.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today to talk about the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and they're implementing a cap-and-trade program for what's called cross-state air pollution. Now, I oppose this new regulation, and I support the resolution of disapproval that we'll be voting on later today. Led by the EPA, Washington bureaucrats are tying up America with red tape. They're tying up our nation, and they're tying up the American people. This year alone, the EPA has issued over 400 final rules. These are rules that do have the effect of law. Well, that's over 2 rules per day so far this year, for each day that the Federal Register has been open for business in 2011. Imagine any business in the United States, in our home communities, businesses having to comply with 2 new EPA rules each day that you're open for business. And of course, if you don't comply, then you face thousands of dollars in fines. This is just business as usual for the EPA. Thousands of rules are filling the Federal Register, 70,000 pages this year alone. The cost of rules issued this year are estimated to eclipse the $100 billion mark. It is time to stop Washington bureaucrats. They're issuing excessive rules without considering their impact on our economy. The problem is that this administration does not believe that there is a regulations problem. They think that more regulations actually create jobs rather than harm jobs. Now, fortunately, a previous Congress passed and President Clinton signed into law what is called the Congressional Review Act. This law gives us our best tool to dismantle bad regulations, and we should use it when appropriate. Majority Leader Reid, one of the authors of this Congressional Review Act, described the process as a reasonable, sensible approach to regulatory reform. I believe that the Senate should use it here today. The Senate should take back some responsibility instead of letting unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats continue to harm our economy. I am standing here today to support Senator Rand Paul's resolution to nullify the EPA's cross-state air pollution rule. The EPA's cross-state air pollution rule was finalized approximately 3 months ago. It is already costing Americans jobs. Over the summer, officials at a Texas utility threw up their hands and said they can't comply. They said it was too costly, too burdensome. 500 jobs in Texas were lost as a result. The EPA's own estimates say another 2,500 jobs will be lost because of this very regulation. Private sector analysis puts the job and cost numbers much higher. The cross-state air pollution rule puts limits on electricity generation for over half the country. It forces Washington's heavy hand on over 1,000 coal, gas, and oil-fired facilities across 28 states. Originally designed for states in the east, the EPA now continues to expand the rule to capture more and more states in the west. The newest version of the rule imposed new requirements for Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas, Iowa, Missouri, and Wisconsin. The compliance costs are very high. By the EPA's own estimate, the rule will cost over $2.4 billion. The EPA also notes that part of these costs will be passed on to U.S. households in the form of higher electricity rates. Well, the cross-state air pollution rule demonstrates how bureaucrats simply do not understand how job creators work and operate their businesses all across this country. The implementation timeline that the EPA has proposed is nearly impossible to follow. The rule was finalized on August 8th, which leaves less than 6 months for companies and states to act and meet the new mandates by January of 2012. The Office of Management and Budget even warned that there would be consequences of such a drastic change in such a short amount of time. Well, Mr. President, in conclusion, this resolution of disapproval will tell the bureaucrats to do their job, but do it following the rules of the road. We all want clean air, and we want it done in a responsible way. This EPA is rushing through rules, causing a train wreck, and our economy, our jobs, and our competitiveness as a nation will suffer as a result. Senator Paul's resolution will save at least 3,000 American jobs and also prevent a rise in electricity costs for American families. By adopting this resolution today, we will help our job creators and help them be more competitive in the global marketplace. It is common sense to rein in the EPA. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois is recognized.
I have great respect for my colleague who just spoke, but I disagree. And I urge my colleagues to take a careful look at the Rand Paul resolution of disapproval when it comes to this issue of air pollution. And I would commend the remarks of our colleague, Senator Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire, who spoke this Tuesday on the floor of the United States Senate, urging the same position to oppose Rand Paul's resolution. She said she could not support that resolution. The cross-state air pollution rule, and I quote from Senator Ayotte's floor statement, is designed to control emissions of air pollution that cause air quality problems in downwind states, and New Hampshire is a downwind state. She went on to argue that this rule, which was first implemented 6 years ago, this is not a new idea coming through this administration, it's been here for years, is simple justice. Why in the world should the people downwind of a polluting state have their lifestyle and opportunity to expand businesses affected? Shouldn't we have reasonable standards that if the air pollution that you put in the air is going to cross over the border, which it naturally will, and affect the air quality in a neighboring state, you have a responsibility? Well, of course you do. But that, unfortunately, the position Senator Paul has taken is that we shouldn't have any standards. We shouldn't have any rules. I would also suggest that there are utility companies, one that visited my office yesterday, that agree with my position. They want to have a good rule when it comes to this cross-state air pollution. John Rowe is the executive of a company named Exelon. Exelon, Commonwealth Edison, been around for a number of years. They've acquired plants in many different locations. He was here on the Hill yesterday as a utility executive lobbying against Rand Paul's resolution of disapproval. If you believe the earlier statements made by my colleague and friend Senator Barrasso, you would assume that the power industry is opposed to the EPA in this position. Not true. Many forward-looking utility executives have made decisions to lessen air pollution. And now, if the Paul resolution is enacted, all of their investment will have been for nothing other than their own self-satisfaction. They have tried to live up to a standard in the law which Senator Paul now wants to eliminate. That's a mistake. And it's a mistake because it really rewards bad conduct. When we come up with new standards to make America healthier and safer, it's interesting the reaction. Some corporate leaders, when they hear of a new standard that might make the air cleaner or water purer, say, that's it, we've heard from the government, we've got to go out and hire a lawyer and a lobbyist to fight it. Others say, that's it, we believe the standard is reasonable, we're going to hire the engineers to make it work. The second approach is one we should reward. The first approach will be rewarded if Senator Paul has his way and eliminates this air pollution standard. Yesterday, Lisa Jackson, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, came in my office, and I talked to her. I said, many times we speak about air pollution in the most general and theoretical terms. To me, it's a very personal thing. I invited her and every one of my colleagues, including my colleagues from Wyoming and Idaho and other states, to step forward the next time they visit a classroom in a school and ask a simple question to the students assembled there, a question I ask every time I visit a school. I ask the students, how many of you know someone who is suffering from asthma? Without fail, half of the students or more will raise their hands. It is a mistake for us to ignore this epidemic of pulmonary disease, which is literally claiming lives every single day in our country. It is a mistake for us to ignore the fact that this public health hazard of air pollution makes asthma sufferers suffer even more. 2 weeks ago, I was at the University of Illinois Children's Hospital and met with some of the parents of asthmatic children. It's a heartbreaking situation. I cannot imagine what it's like to be sitting there on the bedside of your daughter or son when they say, I can't breathe. That's the reality of asthma in its worst situation. Maybe that's not the worst situation. I can recall visiting emergency rooms at children's hospitals in Chicago and having emergency room physicians say, I've had teenagers walk in here and say, I have asthma, I can't breathe, and I sat there and watched them die. There was nothing I could do about it. That is the reality of asthma and pulmonary disease. That is the reality of pollution. And if Senator Paul and his followers have their way, we will reduce the standards for clean air in America. We will endanger more people with asthma and pulmonary conditions, and we will pay a heavy price, not just in the human suffering and death, but in the health care costs associated with it. Why is it? When the Republicans are asked to come up with a way to create jobs in America, their first stop is to eliminate the EPA. Why is it that the House of Representatives, Republican-dominated House, boast that they have a jobs bill, and you look and find they, on 168 separate occasions this year, tried to take away the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect our air and the water that we drink? Is that really the path to economic prosperity in America? The filthy skies that we see in some cities around the United States, the smog that is attendant to it, and of course if you go overseas to China, you can cut the air with a knife 24/7. That is the reality of an unregulated business environment. It's a reality that we can change. We can change with thoughtful regulation. We can change by dedicating ourselves to public health and safety. And we can change by supporting those rules which are consistent with improving public health. I want to salute Senator Ayotte for her statement on the floor. Senator Alexander of Tennessee joined her. We believe there will be a handful of stalwart Republicans who will step up with us today to defeat the Paul Amendment. They believe, as we do, this is not a partisan issue. It does our country no good to declare war on the Environmental Protection Agency and to leave ourselves vulnerable to all the death and disease that will follow if we don't do something meaningful to deal with air pollution. I think we can, and I think we should. And I hope we can do it on a bipartisan basis. Mr. President, when I listen to the suggestions about creating jobs, I think many on the other side overlook the obvious. When we are looking for more energy efficiency and cleaner energy, we are pushing the envelope on technology. We are asking for innovation, entrepreneurship, and new employment to reach it. It's an exciting opportunity for us across this country. I recently visited 2 weeks ago a new coal-fired plant in southern Illinois, near my home area where I was born. It's across the road from a coal mine, and they have put on that plant $1 billion worth of scrubbers and cleaning devices to reduce air pollution dramatically from where it otherwise would have been in a coal-fired plant. They made the investment because it was the right thing to do, and it's a standard that really is moving us forward as a country so that we can say to the American people we can produce the energy we need for our economy to create jobs and grow, but do it in a sensible fashion. If the Republican leadership in the House has its way, the Environmental Protection Agency will all but disappear. Maybe that's their way to expand the economy, but it's not mine. I would rather be creating jobs for energy efficiency and new energy technology right here in the United States so that we end up with cleaner air and purer water. I'd rather do that than to watch the Rand Paul approach pass and find ourselves creating jobs, sadly, on the backs of those who are suffering from asthma. I don't doubt if there are more asthmatics, there will be need for more medical professionals, more emergency rooms, more nebulizers, more medical treatment. Those aren't the kind of jobs we should pointedly try to create. We need those folks, but we shouldn't make their tasks any harder or more difficult by increasing the number of children and young people in America who are suffering from asthma. That is the direct consequence of watering down the air pollution laws in a way that Senator Paul will try to do later today on the floor of the United States Senate. Let's have respect for the people who live in this country and the health of their children. Let's vote down this Rand Paul resolution. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
Republican leaders,
are we in a quorum call?
we are.
I ask consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection. Morning business is closed. The Republican leader is recognized.
I move to proceed to SJ Res 27.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to the consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 27, disapproving a rule submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to the mitigation by states of cross-border air pollution under the Clean Air Act.
Under the previous order, there will be 2 hours of debate equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders or their designees. Who yields time? President, Senator from Kentucky is recognized.
I rise today in support of clean air, clean water, electricity, and jobs. I think we can have a clean environment and jobs, but not if we let this administration continue to pass job-killing regulations. These new regulations will cost over $2 billion and over a course of a decade or more may well exceed $100 billion. We add these new regulations to over $2 trillion worth of regulations already on the books. The President is adding $10 billion worth of regulations every month. And we wonder, we have 14 million people out of work, 2 million new people out of work since this President took office, and yet we continue to add regulation upon regulation upon regulation. So far this year, President Obama has added $80 billion worth of new regulations. If this President is serious about job creation, he needs to cease and desist from adding new job-killing regulations. The vote today has nothing to do with repealing the Clean Air Act. I'm sure we will hear hysterics on the other side. We will hear from environmental extremists. But this has nothing to do with repealing the Clean Air Act. We have rules in place to control emissions from our utility plants. We're not arguing against that. In fact, we are arguing for continuing the same rules that have been in place for some time. Over the decades, our environment is becoming cleaner and cleaner. Emissions have gone down with each successive decade. We are simply asking that the clean air regulations already on the book stay in place and that we do not make the regulations so onerous that we put utility plants out of business and that we have an inability to supply electricity to this country. Over 50% of your electricity comes from coal-fired plants, and if we shut down the coal-fired plants or if we bankrupt them, as the President explicitly said in his campaign that that would be the desire of his policies, if that should occur, be prepared for brownouts in your big cities. Be prepared for days when there will not be electricity, but also be prepared for rising unemployment as these job-killing regulations put a stranglehold on the economy. Now, the question is, can we have clean air and jobs? Absolutely. But to have clean air and jobs, you must have balance. We are at the point of becoming so overzealous and of overreaching to such a great extent that we are killing jobs. We are killing industry, and we are going backwards in time. Before we add new regulations, we must ask, are the current regulations working? The answer is an unequivocal yes. Emissions from utility plants have been declining for decades. In fact, while coal-based power has nearly doubled in the last several decades, emissions have been reduced by 60%. Now, I need to repeat that because if you listen to the hysterics, you would think otherwise. You would think that, the Statue of Liberty will shortly be underwater and the polar bears are all drowning and that we're dying from pollution. It's absolutely and utterly untrue. All of the statistics, and these are statistics from the EPA, all of the statistics from government, from the EPA, show declining pollution. Everything about this argument is that the environment has been improving for decades. In fact, John Stossel has done a program on this, and he asked fifth graders, do you think the environment's cleaner now or 30 years ago? All of our school children have been brainwashed by these environmental hysterics who say, oh, it's a lot worse now. It's actually much better now. Here's some statistics. We're talking about regulating two emissions that come from utility plants. The first is sulfur dioxide. You can see within the midst of the range here the average. The average has been going down every decade. We have reduced sulfur dioxide just in the last 6 years by 45% under the current regulations. If we go to and look at the nitrous oxides, which are also regulated under this series of regulations, you can also see that we've been in decline. The existing rules are working. Nitrous oxides, which can create ozone, are down 45% in the last 5 years. The existing rules are working. All we are arguing for is that we not become overzealous, that we not overreach, that the regulators and the regulations not become job-killing regulations. That's where we're headed. This administration has proposed a series of radical environmental changes to our law. These are regulations that are being written by unelected bureaucrats that we in Congress are not having a say in. So what I'm asking for today is that Congress vote approval or disapproval of these radical extremist regulations, these job-killing regulations that are coming down the pike. Now, if you look at jobs and you look at what will happen to jobs, you will see that these regulations, simply this regulation alone, could cost as much as 50,000 jobs. Indirectly, the people who work for those who would be losing their jobs, as much as 250,000 indirect jobs could be lost from this. And so we do need to ask the important question, are the existing regulations working, or do we need to make the regulations more strict? This is a balancing act, and on the one hand, we have our environment, which we all care about, no matter what the other side will say. Republicans do believe in clean air and clean water, but we also believe in jobs. And it's a balancing act in our country and in all of our communities to try to have both jobs and a clean environment. But you have to look at the facts. You cannot become hysterical and say, the other side's for pollution. That's the kind of stuff we're hearing. We're all for clean air, we're all for clean water, and we're all, or we should all be, for jobs. My concern is that the President has allowed radicals to take over the administration, has allowed environmental extremists to take over policy, and as a consequence, we are losing jobs. If you look at what will happen, and it's important to note, people think they plug into the wall their electric car, and that has nothing to do with coal. 50% of your electricity comes from coal. Does that mean it's perfect? No, but we have to look at the emissions from coal-fired utility. The emissions have been declining decade after decade after decade. So while coal-fired power has nearly doubled in the last several decades, so we're having to produce more electricity from coal in the last several decades, emissions have declined 60%. We are doing a good job with the current rules. Let's don't kill off industry. Let's don't kill off jobs. Let's don't put our citizens at risk during the height of the summer and the height of the heat wave from not having electricity, or from the height of the cold waves in the winter from not having electricity to heat their houses. Now, the alarmists like Al Gore and others would have you believe that everything is worse and that the world is on the edge of some sort of cataclysm. If we allow them to control our debate, if we don't talk reasonably and rationally about the facts, if we don't look at the statistics of what has been occurring to control emissions, we're not going to get anywhere. I'm asking that we base our discussion on rational facts and not on emotions. To give you an idea of where some of these extremists are coming from, there's one of them who is a prominent extremist in this debate, and she has called for a planetary law. She wants, whatever that is, she wants a planetary law of one child per family because she's worried about the carbon footprint of the worst polluters in the whole world. But you know who she thinks the worst polluters in the whole world are? Humans, for breathing. She says we have too many breathers on the planet, and the way we reduce breathers on the planet is that we will have one child per family mandated worldwide. You know that how China does that. So I don't think we can let the debate get out of control here. Today's debate is about overreach. I'd like to give you an example. If you want to see, just think in your mind about what cities looked like in 1900. We have a picture here of Pittsburgh, where I was born in 1905, and then a picture of Pittsburgh today. You may not be able to see the picture from the distance, but you can get an idea that throughout Pittsburgh it was smog and pollution, and it was heavy. They say at noon on a day in Pittsburgh that you could go out and your white shirt would become black. They say at noon in Pittsburgh that the street lanterns were on because you couldn't see through the smog and the smoke. Here's Pittsburgh today. We're not arguing for no rules. The rules we have in place have been working. What we are arguing is not to let the rules become so overzealous, not to become so onerous that we kill jobs and we kill industry. It has to be we want a clean environment and jobs. We have to have a balanced approach to this, and we cannot let hysteria and environmental extremism take over our country. The West led the Industrial Revolution. Life expectancy has doubled since the discovery of electricity. Childhood and infectious mortality have become 1/100th of what they were before electricity. For all of the advance of civilization, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. As we have advanced from an industrial society, there have been problems, but we have been ironing out those problems for 100 years now, and we are doing a good job at doing that, and we shouldn't allow the regulations to become so onerous that we begin to lose jobs. Now, one of the other things people argue about, and one of the big health concerns they have with pollution, is with regard to asthma. The interesting thing is that if you look at all the statistics on all of the emissions from our power plants, all of these declining lines are emissions. Emissions have been going down decade upon decade upon decade. The incidence of asthma has been rising. So if you were looking at this chart, you would say, maybe emissions declining is inversely proportional to asthma. Well, the other argument could be maybe they're not related at all, but they definitely aren't proportional. So you aren't seeing rising incidence of asthma because we're having increased pollution. We have decreased pollution and rising incidence of asthma. So either they're inversely proportional or they're not related at all. This is an important point because what comes out of the hysteria of the environmental extremists are, you'll hear people stand up and say 500,000 people are going to die if this goes through. You know, the vice president recently said that Republicans, because they didn't vote for his jobs plan, were for murder and rape. The ridiculousness of these statistics that are trotted out as truth should be spurned. We should think about things calmly and rationally and decide, can we have clean air and jobs? So when we hear these statistics, let's be very careful not to get carried away. Joel Schwartz has written about asthma and the environment and pollution, and he notes that as air pollution declines, the asthma prevalence continues to rise. One possible conclusion is that air pollution is not a cause of asthma, or not even related. Every pollutant we measure has been dropping for decades, pretty much everywhere, while asthma prevalence has been rising pretty much everywhere. Now, the other side will say, but the American Lung Association says pollution is making asthma worse. Well, you know what? The EPA actually gave the American Lung Association $5 million, so I think their objectivity has been somewhat tainted. If you look at asthma incidence and you say, well, where is asthma the worst? Well, interestingly, asthma is worst in the countries that have the lowest incidence of pollution. And asthma is actually lowest in the countries that have the highest evidence of pollution. So as we look through these statistics, we need to be concerned, one, about the cost of these new regulations. We need to be concerned about having balance between job creation and between job-killing regulations. I'm afraid what's happened is we've opened up the White House and this administration to environmental extremists, the kind of people who say that, well, the polar bears are drowning. You know, the whole thing on the polar bears drowning, it was based on the sighting of 2 polar bears on an iceberg, and they all of a sudden maintain this. Once you started counting the polar bears, apparently they're not in decline, And so the statistics and the hysteria over, within 50 years the Statue of Liberty will be underwater. This is the kind of hysteria you don't want to drive policy. It's the kind of hysteria that when your brother-in-law is out of work and when 2 million new people are out of work since this administration came into power, we need to be concerned about regulatory overreach. Another thing we're concerned about is what will happen with these new regulations with electricity rates. We have a map here that shows across the United States what will happen. When you think about your electricity rates going up and the expense to this, think about who gets hit worst. The working class and senior citizens on fixed income. They are the ones who will suffer from rising electricity rates. It's the person who depends only on their Social Security check and has no other means of supporting themselves and is trying to pay for their electricity. In some regions, electricity could go up almost 20% with this series of regulations that this administration is proposing. This is throughout the country. It's more in some areas than others, but it will go up dramatically. And that is the danger of allowing these new regulations, is what will happen to electric rates, and will poor people in the winter or the heat of the summer be able to afford their electricity? Because the cost of these regulations is real. The cost of these regulations will be passed on to the consumer, and there are dangers, significant dangers, of there being periods of time in large cities where there's not enough electricity to go around and the electrical grid is overwhelmed. As we go forward, and as you begin to hear some of the hysteria that will occur from the other side, be aware that what we're arguing for is not the elimination of regulations. We are arguing for continuing the existing regulations, which the two emissions that we're talking about have declined significantly over decades. Sulfur dioxide has declined over 70% over the last 3 decades. Nitrous oxide has declined over 50% over the last several decades. So the question is, if we're doing an adequate job, if we're doing a good job, if emissions are going down, why would we want to impose new rules that will cause loss of jobs and will cause an increase in the rate of electrical costs? One of the reasons might be, if you were cynical, one of the reasons might be because the president wants to reward some of his campaign contributors. For example, Solyndra. The owners of Solyndra, which make solar panels, or did, they've now gone bankrupt after they ate up $500 million worth of your money. Perhaps this is more of a political argument, that he doesn't like certain industry, but he likes other industry. And so he's willing to spend your money, $500 million worth, on one company. Solyndra went bankrupt recently, and $500 million is still a considerable amount of money. I'll put that in perspective. In Kentucky, we get over $400 million, about $420 million to pave our roads annually each year out of the gas tax that you pay. 35 states get about the same amount, somewhere under $500 million. And yet the president saw fit, because he's been consumed with this environmental extremism, he saw fit to give $500 million, more than 35 states get for their highway funds. He saw fit to take that money and give it to one political contributor because he's decided that he wants more expensive electricity. He wants electricity that comes and is produced by people who have been his campaign contributors. So as we look at adding these new regulations, these need to be put in context. We need to look at and seriously think about whether we want our country to be taken over by environmental extremists, whether or not we want or care about, can we have a clean environment and jobs. I think we can have both. I think we can have both clean air, clean water, and jobs, but it will require a balanced approach. And my fear is if these regulations go forward, that the balance will become imbalanced, that there will be job-killing regulations that cause electrical rates to go up and cause us to have significantly more economic problems than we're already in. So, Mr. President, I call at this time for my colleagues to consider supporting this resolution, which will be a disapproval of these new and onerous regulations, and I reserve the remainder of my time.
Mr. President.
Senator from California is recognized.
Mr. President, would you let me know when I've used 5 minutes, and then I'm going to yield to Senator Reid for his update minutes?
Chair will do so.
Well, I have to say, and I want to be clear about this, if the Paul resolution passes, which I don't think it will, it's so extreme, people in 38 states, 248 million people, will be adversely impacted with filthy, dirty air. And I would ask unanimous consent to place into the record the list of the 38 states, Mr. President, and the impact on the people there.
Without objection.
In the Senator's own state of Kentucky, the prediction is, based on science, that between 530 people and 1,400 people will succumb to premature death. So we're not talking about some political argument. We're talking about the very life and death of the people we represent. I want to thank Senators Durbin, Whitehouse, Lautenberg, Shaheen, and Ayotte for already speaking out on the floor against the Paul Amendment. But I hope today we'll have a big vote, because we are dealing with the health of the people, with the health of the children, with the ability of people to work, because if you can't breathe, you can't work, Mr. President, and we are dealing with jobs, many, many, many jobs, over 1 million jobs that are created as a result of clean technology. Now, Senator Paul insulted the people of America. There was a poll just taken last month. 67% of voters support the cross-air state air pollution rule. That's 85% of Democrats, 68% of independents, and 48% of Republicans. Are they extremists? No. They're mainstream. Are the groups who support this rule extremist? And I think the Senator owes an apology to the American Lung Association for making it sound like they are for air pollution rules because they're getting some kind of payoff. It's an outrage, a complete outrage. Does he think the National Association of County and Health Officials are extremists? Does he think, he said the American Lung Association, he'd already attacked them. How about the American Nurses Association? Does he think they're extremists? Does he think President Richard Nixon was an extremist when he signed the Clean Air Act and he said, clean air, clean water, open spaces, these should once again be the birthright of every American? Richard Nixon. Does he think Richard Nixon was an extremist? Now, look, let's talk about what he wants to do. He wants to repeal a very important rule that's going to clean up the air, that's going to reduce toxic soot, toxic poison soot, and smog-forming air pollution that impacts air quality for over 240 million people. Now, let me say this. Mr. President, I know all of us, every one of us, 100 of us in this chamber, would condemn it if somebody took all their garbage and put it on the lawn of the next-door neighbor. That's what this cross-air pollution rule is about. It's about states that don't crack down on pollution. They have smokestacks that blow over the pollution into other states, and they say, isn't it wonderful? We don't really have any problem here. It's your problem. When I made this analogy, Senator Carper corrected me. He said, well, he said, you're right, it's a good analogy as far as it goes, but garbage isn't usually poison. So I'll amend my analogy to say this. If we knew someone had garbage that included poison, and they took that garbage that included poison and put it on someone else's front lawn, that would be a terrible thing to do, and it would be the moral responsibility of that party to clean it up and not do it again. And that's what this rule is about. Now, I want to talk about specifics rather than be vague. This rule that Senator Paul seeks to cancel out, repeal, prevents up to 34,000 cases of premature death, 19,000 emergency room and hospital visits, 400,000 cases of aggravated asthma attacks, and 1.8 million lost work and school days. It is estimated to provide up to $280 billion in annual benefits by 2014. So all this flailing around of arms and calling people extremists simply cannot erase the facts that what Senator Paul is doing is extreme, is hurtful to our people. How many people feel good when they look at a child like this who is desperately seeking air, desperately seeking air? Here's the exhaler, here's the inhaler. Exhale from these dirty plants and inhale clean air. And it reminds me of a story I just read in the New York Times that talks about China, where at the end of the day, what happens there